Okay, top of page 144, defining a style rule. In every version of CSS, you apply a style rule containing a list of style properties to an element or a group of elements known as a selector. The general syntax of a CSS style rule is you have the selector, which could be font, and then the property, color, as an example, colon blue as value 1, and then you could have other things too, where the selector identifies an element or a group of elements within the document, and the property value pairs specify the style properties and their values. For example, to display the text of all H1 headings in blue and centered horizontally on the page, you could use the following style rule. To apply these style properties to more than one element, you specify the elements in the comma-separated list. The following style rule causes all H1 through H6 headings to be displayed in blue and centered on the page. Like HTML, CSS ignores the use of white space, so you can also enter your styles on a single line, as in the following example. Okay? Writing a style rule on a single line saves space, but entering each style property on a separate line often makes your code easier to read and edit. You will see both approaches used in the CSS files you encounter on the web. Tip: you can make your style sheets easier to manage by entering the style names in alphabetical order. Okay, and we'll get to that in a minute. But applying a style sheet. The design you apply to a website is usually a combination of several style sheets. In general, the style sheet that is loaded last has precedence over style sheets loaded earlier. Figure 3.4 summarizes the different types of style sheets in the order they are usually installed and processed by browsers. So, access last is the author's inline styles. The author's embedded styles is next to last. The ones that are first are the browser's internal style sheet. So the first style sheet interpreted by the browser is the one built into the browser itself. The current appearance of the Sunny Acres web page, found in Figure 3.2, is based on styles applied by the browser itself that are contained within its own style rules about how headings, paragraphs, inline images, and so forth should be rendered. Browsers use similar default styles. So if you rely only on the browser's internal style sheet, your websites should appear alike across most browsers. Almost all browsers allow users to modify the default settings of the internal style sheet. For example, a user could change the font size assigned to paragraph and heading text, set foreground and background colors, and specify whether or not to display inline images. Browsers such as Internet Explorer and Safari also allow users to substitute their own style sheets for the browser's internal sheet, providing more control over how the browser renders the page it encounters. One advantage of user-defined style sheets is that they can make the web more accessible to visually impaired users who may require larger fonts or the absence of clashing color schemes. Figure 3.5 shows the advanced dialog box from Safari in which users can replace the browser's internal style sheet with their own. So this is right in Safari, Figure 3.5. Okay, external style sheets. Styles set by the author of a web page and stored in an external style sheet are loaded after internal and user-defined style sheets. You've already worked with external style sheets in the first two tutorials using CSS files created for you. Recall that an external style sheet is included by adding the link element to the document head, where the URL is the URL of the external style sheet file. The browser sheet rules in an external style sheet that takes precedence over any rules set in the browser's internal style sheet or a user-defined style sheet. Tammy already has created a style sheet for her sample pages to define how the elements should be laid out on the page. You'll apply the style rules from her CSS file to the Sunny Acres page now. So we're going to go to the home page. And I'm going to make this bigger, and I'm going to go to the head because we're going to put in the style sheet. This is nothing new. We've already done this. Okay, and I'm going to save it. And I'm going to open it again. And now, it is a little bit different. We've got the picture over here and stuff now. So it's been altered a little bit. So you can, and it should look like page 147. The layout, the style sheet changes the layout of the page, displaying the navigation links in a column on the left and the main page content in a column on the right. The width of the page also has been reduced to make the content easier to read. So, page 148. On large websites that involve hundreds of pages, you might decide to use different styles for different groups of pages to give a visual cue to the users about where they are on the site. One way of organizing these different styles is to break them into smaller, more manageable units, the different style sheets that can be imported into a single sheet. To import a style sheet, add the command that's there to the style sheet file where URL is the URL of an external style sheet file. For example, a company might have one style sheet named company.css that contains basic styles used in all web pages, and another style sheet named support.css that only applies to web pages containing technical support information. The following code added to a style sheet imports both files. The import statement must always come before any other style rules in the style sheet. When a browser encounters the import statement, it imports the content of the style sheet file directly into the current style sheet. Much as you had typed the style as if you did it yourself. Okay, the import rule has the same impact as adding multiple link elements to the HTML file. An advantage of the import rule is that it simplifies your HTML file, since you only need to access one style sheet file, and it places all style rules and decisions about which style sheets to include and exclude in an external file. This is an important distinction if you want to put all of your design choices in the external style sheet file, which you can then easily edit and modify without having to touch the HTML document or try to find it. If you have a web page that's got a whole bunch of files, that would be really difficult to find the page you need. So we have an external style sheets, or we can import them just as we were talking about, and then the second kind, embedded style sheets. Another type of style sheet created by a web page author is an embedded style sheet in which the styles are inserted directly within the head element of an HTML document using the style element. Okay? Where styles are the rules of the style sheet. For example, the following embedded style sheet applies a rule to display the text of all H1 headings from the document centered horizontal and in red. Okay? So the exact order in which external style sheets and embedded style sheets are processed by the browser depends on the order in which they are listed within the HTML file. This code, where you have the external style sheet link, and then the embedded style, with the opening and closing style, loads the external style sheet first, then the embedded sheet. However, if that order is switched in the code, where the embedded is first and the external style sheet is processed after the embedded sheet. Unlike an external style sheet, an embedded style sheet is applied only to the web page in which it is placed. Thus, if you want to apply the same style to all of the headings on your website, it is more efficient and easier to manage if you define your styles only once within an external style sheet and link all of the pages to that file. If you later need to change the site design, you'll have to edit only one file rather than dozens. Then there's even inline styles. Okay, the very last styles to be interpreted by the browser are inline styles, which are styles applied directly to specific elements using the style attribute. Before I go anywhere farther, the tip says always place embedded styles after external style sheets to avoid confusion about which style sheet is loaded last. So always put the external one before the embedded one. All right, so there's an example of an inline element where element is the HTML element and style rules are CSS styles applied to that element. For example, the following style attribute is used to display the text of a specific H1 heading in green and centered on the page. Okay, the advantage in using inline styles is that it is clear exactly what page element is being formatted. However, inline styles are not recommended in most cases because they make changing styles tedious and inefficient. For example, if you want to use inline styles to format all of your headings, you would have to locate all of the H1 through H6 headings of the web pages within the entire website and add style attributes to each tag. This would be no small task on a large website containing hundreds of headings spread out among dozens of web pages. And it would be a nightmare if you had to modify the design of a large website that was created using inline styles. However, the primary reason to not use inline styles is that you want to, as much as possible, separate document content from document design. Ideally, the HTML code and CSS styles should be so separate that one group of employees could define the page content using HTML and another group could define the page design using CSS. This isn't possible with inline styles because the code for the page design is intermingled with the code for the page content. So basically limit the use of inline styles and use external style sheets as much as possible. Tip: view your website with and without your style sheet. It should be readable even if a user is limited to the default style supplied by the web browser. Exploring the style cascade, okay, with the potential for many different style sheets to be applied to the same web page, there has to be an orderly method in which conflicts between the different style sheets are resolved. CSS does this by assigning a level of importance to each style within the most important style rule taking precedence over the competing rules, okay? Style precedence and specificity. Many factors determine how the important... I'll pick up in a sec. Okay, with the precedence, which one comes first? Okay, we got many factors determine how the importance of each style is calculated, but as a general rule of thumb, all other things being equal, the more specific style is applied instead of the more general. Thus, a style applied to a specific paragraph is given more importance than a general style applied to an entire web page, and a style applied to a section of text within that paragraph has more importance than the style for the entire paragraph. For example, the following set of style rules would set the text color of the web page to black except for text within the header element. Specifically, specificity is only a concern when two or more styles conflict. If the style rules involve different properties, there is no conflict and both rules are applied. If two style rules have equally specificity and thus equal importance, then the one that is defined last is the style in the style sheet that's used. So inheritance, an additional factor in applying a style sheet, is that properties are passed from a parent element to its children in a process known as style inheritance. For example, to set the text color of a page to blue, you could apply the style shown, and every element nested within the body element, which is every element on the web page, would inherit the style. This means that the text of every heading, every paragraph, every numbered list, and so forth would be displayed in blue unless a different text color were defined for those specific elements. Thus, the style rules, okay, would result in the H1 heading text appearing in blue and centered even though the text alignment is specifically set within the style rule for the H1 element. Sounds confusing, but it's not. Okay, if you have any questions about it, let me know. Basically, the closer you get to something, that's the thing that matters. If you put an H1 element as being bold on a page in a paragraph, that would have precedence over any kind of H2 tag in a style sheet.